Welcome to Canna News. California's struggle legal cannabis industry is expected to grow this year to $3.1 billion, but it remains outmatched by a thriving illegal market right with bargains, a report concluded Thursday. Consumers are spending roughly $3 in the state's underground cannabis economy for every $1 in the legal one, said the report from industry advisors Arcview Market Research and BDS Analytics. California kicked off broad legal sales in 2018. Hefty tax rates on illicit sales have been blamed for slower than expected activity in the new license market. The report projected sales in California, the world's largest legal cannabis market, would grow 23% this year. Companies that survived a rough 2018 are battle-hardened and kicked off a merger and acquisition flurry in the first half of 2019 that will allow them to leverage their positions in California to compete across the country. Troy Dayton, CEO of the Arcview Group, said in a statement. But those figures projecting robust growth don't square easily with reports from many businesses that say they are struggling to keep their doors open. There appears to be a growing divide between well-financed companies and big-dollar investors that are gaining ground on smaller operators just trying to get into the black. Consumers can reap big discounts by buying under the table, with many underground shops operating in plain sight. Thus far, law enforcement and regulators have been unable to significantly slow the vast illicit market. The report projects the legal market will gradually find its footing. By 2024, legal spending is expected to climb to $7.2 billion, with the illegal market dropping to $6.4 billion. Presidential hopeful Senator Bernie Sanders has long been ahead of the curve when it comes to cannabis reform, but this week he took his support for legalization a huge step further. During an experience on the Joe Rogan Experience podcast on Tuesday, Sanders announced that if elected, he wouldn't merely support congressional legislation to legalize cannabis. He'll do it through an executive order. What I call for now is the legalization of marijuana in America, Sanders told Rogan. I believe we can do that through executive order, and I will do that, he said. A sort of legislative silver bullet, an executive order would enable Sanders as president to bypass what currently a Congress-paralyzed bipartisan gridlock. His comment represents one of the boldest strategies for cannabis reform by any presidential hopeful. In his interview with Rogan, Sanders echoed the legalization and descheduling arguments he has been making for years, arguments that have earned him an A+ rating from advocacy group Normal. In 2015, Sanders sponsored the first Senate bill to end federal cannabis prohibition. A lot's changed in a single election cycle. When Sanders advocated for federal legalization during his 2016 presidential bid, his ideas were seen by many as extreme. Now every major 2020 presidential challenger, except Joe Biden, supports legalization. A growing number of cannabis companies, both ancillary and plant-touching, are creating internship programs for college students and graduates, whom the firm hopes will eventually become full-time employees. Florida-based marijuana-focused social media firm Hi There, for example, sees internships as a way to cultivate talent and find full-time staffers after they've completed the training program. Seeing internships as a vehicle for businesses to evaluate potential workers and bring them on for the appropriate position. They believe the generation entering internship programs today are paralleling them into full-time jobs, either have the skills or can learn them on the job. Michigan regulators suspended the license of a medical cannabis testing facility after determining that the health and safety of patrons or employees were jeopardized. The Marijuana Regulatory Agency released a complaint bulletin detailing the suspension of Iron Laboratories. The company alleges several violations regarding the company's facility in Ward Lake, where Michigan-based Iron Laboratories tests for pesticides, microbials, and THC content. The agency said it discovered inaccurate results and/or unreliable testing and reporting practices by the lab. Though no adverse product reactions have been reported in relation to the lab, regulators advise patients and caregivers to use caution when using products tested by Iron Laboratories. The agency, however, isn't recalling any cannabis products at this time. The FBI is looking into potential corruption in the burgeoning U.S. marijuana industry, particularly in Western markets, and is seeking tips to investigate. As an increasing number of states change their marijuana legislation, the FBI is seeing a public corruption threat emerge in the expanding cannabis industry. FBI spokeswoman Molly Halpern said in a podcast released by the FBI on Thursday. States require licenses to grow and sell the drug, opening the possibility for public officials to become susceptible for bribes in exchange for those licenses. She asked listeners to contact local FBI field officers if they suspect either a dispensary is operating illegal or public corruption in the marijuana industry. Supervisory Special Agent Regino Chavez added that the FBI has learned of some of cannabis business licenses being sold for as much as $500,000, an indicator of how much of the corrupting influence license caps can have for the new market. And FBI intelligence analyst David Kirshner said the issue won't be disappearing anytime soon. Tax revenues generated by the legal recreational marijuana industry are highly unpredictable because of the lack of reliable data, according to a report released Monday by the Pew Charitable Trusts, an independent non-profit organization. Uncertainties regarding sales, prices, and demand make projections difficult, according to the report. The study focuses on why states need to be cautious about viewing MJ tax revenues as a stable funding source. But many of the factors highlighted in the report also apply to investors in cannabis-related businesses trying to make new projections in new and growing recreational markets. The biggest hurdle for states is the lack of reliable data, Alexandria Zhang, a Pew research officer, said during a briefing about the report. Zhang was one of 4 authors of the report. Other challenges, she said, include accurately estimating marijuana demand, degree of consumption prices and how prices change demand. Revenue growth tends to slow significantly as markets mature. Predicting consumer preferences, which change over time and also vary from market to market. Forecasting the amount of conversion from a black market to legal market. The impact of tourism demand. Competition from neighboring states. How states regulate the industry also has a big impact on prices and tax revenues, she said. She cited California, which collected only $345 million in marijuana tax revenues in 2018, far below the $643 million projected, in part because of the state's slow conversion from an illicit to legal market. Heavy regulation, high taxes, and high prices, as well as municipal bans, were also said to dampen legal sales. Wholesale cannabis prices appear on the rise in long-standing adult-use cannabis markets, Colorado, Oregon, and Washington state, according to 2 recent reports and insight from growers. The upward trending prices seem to be increasing because of stronger demand and weaker supply beyond the typical summer economics dynamics. More growers going out of business, farmers pivoting to hemp, and cultivators sitting on product hoping for a more favorable market. Seaport Global, an investment bank with offices in New York and New Orleans, recently released an analysis that shows wholesale marijuana prices going up since mid-April in the 3 states that first legalized recreational cannabis: Colorado, Washington, and Oregon. According to the report, wholesale marijuana prices have risen by 100% in Oregon, 46% in Washington, and 17% in Colorado. Thanks for joining us at Canna News. Be sure to like and subscribe to our social channels and check us out on the Investor News channel through Roku app on your smart TV. I'm your host, Sarah Lee Dobbs. See you next time.